This lesson deals with plant parts and the role they play in the life of the plant. We will cover leaves, stems, roots, flowers, fruit, and seed. We will start with the leaves. Leaves capture energy from sunlight through photosynthesis and converts the energy into sugar. Most people are familiar with the process, but leaves do more. They also breathe. They must breathe in order to capture the carbon dioxide needed to make sugar and for the release of oxygen that photosynthesis produces. Don't worry about all the terms on this slide. I want you to notice just two things. Notice how packed the top layer of the leaf is and how the bottom layer is much more open. The top layer is where most photosynthesis takes place and is packed so that the most sunlight possible can be captured. The bottom layer is open to allow for gas exchange. Remember, photosynthesis absorbs carbon dioxide and gives off oxygen, and a leaf must be able to allow carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. The bottom of the leaf has structures called stomates. These are breathing pores that allow gas exchange. They allow carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. The size of the stomate opening is controlled by guard cells. The guard cells can open to allow the maximum amount of gas exchange or close to cut it off. An open stomate means photosynthesis will be more efficient because there is more carbon dioxide available. Why would there be a reason for the stomates to close? Well, when the stomate is open, not only is it easier for carbon dioxide to enter, but it's also easier for water vapor to escape. Plants under drought stress will close stomates to preserve water and prevent wilting. This is an actual photo of the cross-section of the leaf. Note again how densely packed the top layer of the leaf is and how open the bottom is. Again, this is to maximize photosynthesis in the top layer of the leaf and maximize gas exchange in the bottom layer of the leaf. Stems have a number of functions in a plant. They provide support for leaves so they can maximize sunlight absorption. They also carry water and nutrients from the roots to the leaves and carry sugar made in leaves to other parts of the plant. Stems grow from meristems. Meristems are areas of growth. Plants grow from certain areas. In the case of the stem, they grow from the tip. The tip of the stem is known as the apical meristem and is the only place where cell division takes place, resulting in additional length. This is a photo of the apical meristem. Remember when we were talking about tissue culture? The apical meristem is the portion of the plant that was placed on the auger. So if you carve your initials in a tree trunk at 3 feet high, how high will those initials be after 20 years? 3 feet. Trees don't grow from the base, but from the tips of the branches. So what happens if you cut off the top bud in this slide? The top bud containing the apical meristem releases a hormone that prevents the lower buds from growing. Removing the top bud allows the buds underneath to grow. Removing buds can also help thicken up a plant. This is often done on garden mums. Let's look at a video to see how this is done. Remember that grass is a monocot and grows in a different manner. Grass grows from the base of the leaf blade and the base of the leaf sheath. Do you see why grass plants are less injured by mowing? You are not removing the growing point, and the plant can continue growing without interruption. Most broadleaf plants, the dicots, cannot survive under regular mowing because you're removing the growing point. However, there are a few broadleaves that can survive because of the way they grow. Take dandelions, for example. They have a rosette form of growth under lawn conditions, and so the growing point is not removed when mowing. Or consider spurge. It is a prostrate growing habit and is often found where the lawn is thin. Again, mowing does not remove a significant number of growing points. Roots are out of sight and therefore too often out of mind. However, roots are foundational to the health of the plant. The roots absorb water and nutrients, which are then transported to the upper portions of the plant. It is obvious that roots need water in order to survive, but roots are just as dependent on oxygen. Actually, every living cell in a plant must have oxygen. If oxygen is able to reach the roots will die. If the roots die, so does the plant. Flooded conditions cause roots to drown. Some trees, such as redbud, will die in a week if flooded, but others, such as willow and cottonwood, can live for months. Does that mean that the roots of willow and cottonwood don't need oxygen? No. Rather, willow and cottonwood have the ability to move oxygen from the upper parts of the tree through the plant and into the roots. There are certain things that a gardener can do to help plants that have survived a flood. For example, if a crust has formed, break it up with a hoe or a steel rake to allow oxygen to reach the roots. Competition from weeds or other plants can slow recovery from the damage caused by a flood. Mulching will not only reduce competition, but also will keep the soil cool and moist, allowing for a quicker recovery. People have a tendency to delay watering after a flood since the soil has been saturated. This is often a mistake. Saturated soils damage root systems, and so timely watering is necessary to help plants recover. If plants wilt, it is time to water. So what is the proper method for watering plants? Watering deeply and infrequently will force roots to go deeper and make use of more of the soil profile. Shallow watering encourages shallow roots. Remember that roots need water and oxygen. If they find both at shallow depths, they will not expend the energy needed to send roots deeper. By watering deeply and infrequently, the roots are forced to go deeper in order to get the water they need. The surface of the soil dries first due to evaporation, as well as most roots are shallow. Roots must go deeper to get the water they need, even though the deeper soils contain less oxygen. It is possible to grow very nice-looking plants by watering often, but there will be more water loss due to evaporation, and the plants are much less drought tolerant. Once the surface of the soil is dry, there aren't any deeper roots to take advantage of the moisture found in deeper soils. This can cause severe problems if an area is put under water restrictions due to drought. If you have ever dug a trench near a tree, you likely have noticed that most roots are shallow. Usually over 80% of a tree's roots are in that top foot of soil. This is because roots need oxygen, and oxygen levels are highest within that top foot. Roots extend far further than the outermost spread of the limbs. This photo shows wheat didn't germinate near a line of trees due to competition from tree roots. Roots often extend 3 to 5 times as far as the drip line of the tree. Roots absorb water and nutrients from special roots known as root hairs. You can see from this photo that root hairs are very small and thread-like. You have probably heard that a single cell cannot be seen with the naked eye. Root hairs are the exception, as each root hair is actually a single cell. Root hairs are short-lived and usually only live a few days. Therefore, new roots must be constantly produced so that new root hairs can form and water and nutrients can be absorbed. Roots also grow from the tips due to the location of the root meristem, as you can see in this drawing. A root cap helps protect the root meristem as the root is pushed through the soil. So what happens if you prune a root? Roots do not have buds like stems do, so they react a bit differently. Any existing side roots will elongate. Also, new roots form just behind the cut and extend out from there. Nurserymen who produce field-grown stock will often root prune in order to capture more roots when the root ball is dug. So where should you root prune if you transplant the following year? Pruning should be done inside where the root ball will be dug. Pruning should be done the year before the root ball is dug. Remember, the roots extend out from the pruning cut, and so the root ball must be dug outside this area to capture those new roots. As you can see, a healthy root system is vital to producing a healthy plant. Now let's turn our attention to flowers. You can ignore most of the terms on this slide except for two. Remember that the stamen is the male part of the flower, and the pistil is the female part. Some flowers are what we call complete or perfect. They have both male and female parts in the same flower. In other words, they have both stamens and a pistil. However, not all plants have complete flowers. Some plants have male flowers that are separate from the female flowers. Let's start with perfect flowers. They are termed synoecious as they have both male and female parts in the same flower. Don't worry about remembering these special terms such as synoecious. We're including them in case you are curious or want to impress all your friends. Not all perfect flowers are self-fruitful. In other words, some plants cannot pollinate themselves even if they have perfect flowers. For example, most apples are not self-fruitful and must be cross-pollinated. To illustrate, if you have one red delicious tree, you'll not get much fruit because it isn't self-fruitful. To put this another way, the pollen from the red delicious tree will not pollinate a red delicious tree. Therefore, if you have two red delicious trees, you still will not get much fruit because they are the same variety. However, if you have a red delicious and a Jonathan apple, you'll have plenty of fruit on both. The pollen from the Jonathan pollinates the red delicious, and the pollen from the red delicious pollinates the Jonathan. Imperfect flowers have separate male and female flowers. The illustration on the right is of a female flower. In some cases, the male and female flowers are on the same plant. This is termed monoecious. Our example here is watermelon. The female flower is a tiny watermelon behind the flower, but the male flower does not. Other vegetable vining crops such as muskmelon and cucumber are also monoecious. Vegetable gardeners will often notice that their vine crops such as watermelon, muskmelon, and cucumber produce many flowers but no fruit early in the season. This is because the early flowers on our vegetable vine crops tend to be all male. In time, the plant will start to produce female flowers as well, and fruit will begin to appear. Sometimes flowers don't look like we expect them to. For example, the male flower of the sweet corn is the tassel, and the silks are the female flower. Some plants have male and female plants. These are known as dioecious plants. Examples would be cottonwood and the Osage orange tree. As mentioned in an earlier lesson, male cottonwoods don't produce cotton and are the source of cottonless cottonwood trees. Now let's look at fruit and seed. Don't worry about memorizing any of the names for specific types of fruit, which we will cover later. We just want to familiarize you with these concepts. Horticultural terms and botanical terms for fruit differ. For example, horticulturally, a tomato is a vegetable, but botanically, it is a fruit. You wouldn't think that these definitions would make much difference in real life, but they can. Take tomatoes, for example, and the story behind why it is legally a vegetable and not a fruit. It all comes back to Congress and protective tariffs. In 1883, the U.S. Congress passed an act establishing protective tariffs on several commodities, including vegetables. There was a 10% tariff imposed on the value of imported vegetables coming into the U.S. from the Caribbean. An enterprising importer had a load of tomatoes shipped from the Caribbean region through the port of New York in 1886. When assessed a tariff, he protested, saying tomatoes were fruits and not vegetables. He sued through the court system, and his case eventually came before the U.S. Supreme Court. The court ruled that tomatoes would be classed as vegetables, not fruit. Therefore, he lost the case and had to pay the tariff. In 1893, Justice Horace Gray wrote the following opinion for the court. Botanically speaking, tomatoes are the fruit of the vine, just as cucumbers, squashes, beans, and peas. But in the common language of the people, whether consumers or sellers of provisions, all these are vegetables which are grown in kitchen gardens, and, whether eaten cooked or raw, are like potatoes, carrots, parsnips, turnips, beets, cauliflower, cabbage, celery, or lettuce, usually served at dinner in, with or after the soup, fish or meats, which constitute the principal part of the meal, and not like fruits, generally like desserts. The Supreme Court decision established the working definition and is currently used to determine whether a particular food item should be classed as a fruit or vegetable. However, there is still some question regarding melons because they are grown like vegetables, but are generally eaten like fruits. We may need another court decision for melons. So the horticultural definition of a fruit is: the edible portions of plants that contain seeds and pulpy surrounding tissue have a sweet or tart taste, generally consumed as breakfast beverages, breakfast and lunch side dishes, snacks, or desserts. But the botanical definition of a fruit is the mature ovary of a plant, including its seeds, covering any closely connected tissue, without any consideration of whether these are edible. These are all different types of fruit from a botanical viewpoint. Notice it includes walnut, which would not be considered a fruit from a horticultural perspective. Let's look at these separately. Drupes are a one-seeded fruit that is derived entirely from an ovary. Examples include peaches and cherries. Pome fruits are derived from the fusion of an ovary and a receptacle. Examples include apples and pears. Samaras and nuts are derived from the fusion of the ovary and perianth. A samara is winged, but a nut is not. Blackberries and strawberries are aggregate fruits which are derived from many ovaries of a single flower. Berries are multiseeded fruit from a single ovary. Blueberries are a false berry. False berries are a multiseeded fruit from the fusion of an ovary and receptacle. So how is this useful? Is this a crabapple or cherry? There's an easy way to tell the difference. Crabapples, a pome fruit, have several seeds, but cherries, a drupe, have a single pit. So this information can be useful. However, remember you do not have to memorize all these different types of fruit. We will not spend much time on seed. We'll discuss the hypocotyl, epicotyl, and cotyledon. What does hypo mean? It means under. For example, hypodermic needle means the needle goes under the skin. So hypocotyl describes what will become the root as the root goes down. The epicotyl is a shoot as it goes up. The cotyledon is used for energy storage, so the plant has enough stored energy to make a root and shoot until it can photosynthesize and make its own food. So that is it for all the major structures in a plant. This has been the longest lesson of the 4 we have covered thus far.